Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, do, do. Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce, and welcome to a informal live stream. My audio, hopefully I'll be able to correct it as the live stream goes on. This is a very informal live stream. I haven't done one of these in a while because I'm getting distracted by other things. And so I just wanted to check in and see how you guys are doing and see what's going on with you, seeing what's going on with the world and seeing what's going to pop out of my brain because I never know what's going to happen. Cool Cat says, hey dudes. So hello. I have been, I guess we are now in 2022 and I have not, to my knowledge, done a live stream this year on my own. I think I had Lindsay on recently, and that counted, or that counts, but yeah, just me checking in. I don't think it's been this month or since December. There's a slight reverb when very close. Universal Audio Thunderbolt. It might be just relaying back and forth, or there might be something wrong in my things, which is good to know. I can't fix it right now unless I understand. So, yeah, truckers is happening. My dad was a trucker. He was a trucker for a long time. He always wanted to be a pastor, but he had me, and then my brother, and then my sister, and then my sister, and then my brother. And the whole pastor thing got kind of delayed, and he raised us off of trucker earnings, which were rather a pittance in... I guess we live mostly outside of Sacramento. He worked for California Builder Supply, CBS, for a while, and he would drive around the area. And he would drive around the area delivering lumber. And so now there's trucker things happening in Canada. I haven't been totally keeping up on this. But there was also something that was released on the New York Post, like an hour of undercover footage or some footage that they got through a information request that shows that Biden administration is shipping illegal immigrants from the border into the Northeast. I haven't really looked into it, but it's kind of weird. Some weird stuff's going on in the world. But I haven't been studying anything other than what I've been working on, and maybe we'll get to that. Rock and Roll God 16 says, I've really enjoyed your content. What are your future goals with this channel? The only future goal I have for this channel is more content that people can enjoy, and I'm just always looking for content and producing content. Creating content or co-creating content, as most of my content that I'm creating right now is with interviews. I'm not doing a lot of talking head stuff. I haven't even been doing one-on-one with the camera stuff that much lately because I've been pushing all of my creative energies into the Evergreen musical, and that's coming along pretty well. So I don't really have a future. I don't even have a future. I don't even schedule more than a couple weeks out. So I do all these interviews, but I end up only scheduling them. Like I do this mad scheduling spree. I book a bunch of people and then I just interview them. And then I go on another mad interviewing or scheduling spree and I just reach out to people and line it all up. So I think I have stuff booked for the next month. Just a bunch of different interesting people on a bunch of different interesting topics going on. Looks like we are doing okay with the audio. It's really interesting when I get Lindsay on the channel, because we do live streams and they've become kind of a part of this channel and they become really just informal, and we get to check in with James Lindsay and see where he's been and see how his ideas are developing and kind of give this unfolding relationship between myself and James, and then also like a deeper and deeper character sketch of James Lindsay. But because James Lindsay is rather high profile, you get these people watching these live streams not understanding that this is kind of this regular informal thing, and they demand a lot of stuff from me that I'm not really giving. Like if I spill water on myself, they get mad at me for fumbling or bumbling or whatever, which is interesting because James is attracting a lot of attention. So of course a lot of that attention is really scrutinistic and that scrutiny gets applied to me. But, I could always be better. I could always be a more formal or more professional with everything that I publish online. If I didn't want to get accusations of being unprofessional, I should be more professional. But it's just interesting that that is the content that brings a lot of strangers into the channel, and then they don't see, or either they they like James and they want to learn more, and then they end up liking me and they stick around and hear some other stuff, or they're just there for some other reason because some other YouTuber made a video about James Lindsay, which happens from time to time. Somebody asked me about a video I took down. Every once in a while, I'll interview somebody about really personal stuff, and then that personal stuff will be criticized by other people. And the person that I interviewed had been attracted to me because they saw that I would be really open and gentle with them, and they are not necessarily prepared for some of the more critical eyes and lenses that can be applied to people when they come onto my channel. So they might not be prepared for not necessarily backlash, but criticism. And there are certain groups that get really up in arms about certain topics that I cover. And some of those groups can be pretty darn harsh on people. And some people, myself included, are not really equipped to deal with negative attention. Though I've learned how to just not make it matter what happens on the internet. That the internet is a place for me to generate content. If people want to judge my character, they can. They're free to do that. Everybody's free to judge my character, but the content of my character actually supersedes any given piece of content that I do. Not everybody is attenuated to negative attention, and sometimes that negative attention causes them a severe amount of psychological distress, and then they ask me to take the video down. And so sometimes I will take a video down because of that. Sometimes I will take an interview down because somebody doesn't want they want to kind of take themselves off of the internet. That's happened with a couple of the detransitioners. At least one detransitioner has asked me to erase her content because I think she didn't want to be involved in the discussion anymore. She didn't want her internet avatar connected with that particular discussion. She wants to go on, move on with her life, which I totally understand, especially somebody who's, 19 or 20. You're looking at like, well, all this attention that I could possibly get. There was one Evergreen student that had reached out to me to give his side of the story of the Evergreen State College protests. He contacted me to give the fuller picture of the thing. I published that interview, and then I used that interview as a part of my documentary. And then when 2020 happened with the Black Lives Matter stuff, I think, he didn't really say why, but I think he got really agitated that his name was associated with criticism of this movement, even though he himself didn't criticize the movement. He was standing up for the small Black Lives Matter movement that happened at the Evergreen State College. But because so much of his information was wrong, so much of his reality about that situation was warped by the narrative that he was thrust in. One might argue a lot of people's narratives were warped by the Black Lives Matter 2020 protests that occurred. But he threatened to sue me and take me to court, that I was maligning his character for showing him saying something that wasn't true. And he was really dogged about that. So I kind of threw up my hands and then just changed his voice and put pixels over his face. So that was one thing that I ended up redacting. And if I had counsel, if I had somebody on, what was it called, retainer, I would have asked to what degree I should worry about litigation. But I don't think I was actually in any trouble or potential trouble because the guy reached out to me. But anyways, he was being a total bitch about it. So I'm like, whatever, man. All right. It's part of the permanent record. So, okay. Let's see what you stand by your principles. Your character has been shown. So whatever. But every once in a while you have to, depends on what we mean by free speech. John Brown says Benjamin is a champion of free speech. I really think that free speech is really, really important, but I understand that some people don't want some things that they said out there anymore. And I believe in forgiveness, and I understand that the internet is not such a forgiving place. And I respect the wishes, especially people who I have interviewed, especially people who I have interviewed who are under distress or duress. I want to, lessen their distress by, I guess, taking interviews off. And maybe that could be seen as some form of censorship, but it was directed by the individual themselves, not by the corporation or some outside force necessarily. I guess it's a roundabout way of censoring people to gang up on them in such a way that they take their voice out of the conversation. And, there's a bunch of questions about the amount of responsibility that somebody has for the words that they put out there. And if they're not really necessarily aware of all the different possibilities of what could happen with the words that you put out there, and especially if people come after you in a group and are pretty negative and you're not used to that, or you're a sensitive soul, I can understand why you'd want to, I guess, censor yourself in a way. So I don't know if what you're saying, John Brown, about me being a champion of free speech was necessarily like a tongue-in-cheek criticism of me, like deleting episodes, which is kind of a form of censorship. But generally, in principle, yeah, free speech is absolutely essential. I don't think we're going to get anywhere without the ability to speak freely, even if that speech does have consequences, as they say. But a lot of people who talk about consequences or accountability when they talk about speech that they don't like, it's always kind of who made you in charge of judging other people? That's a big question. I judge people. I judge people all the time. A lot of the content that I could be doing is judging other people. A lot of the punditry that you do is it's really, I was speaking with a bigger name than me who's working on her own YouTube channel. And I was talking about my experience. And for some reason, she looked up to me, which was kind of novel to me because I look up to her. And she was asking me about different aspects of doing the YouTube game. I lost my train of thought. And I was talking about free speech. I was talking about mob behavior, people going after you, and a certain amount of resilience. I had an idea. I completely lost it about the resilience of putting your voice out there and the negative attention that could come to you, and to what degree you need to take that seriously, and to what degree you really don't need to take it seriously. Because I care about the work that I do, right? But to what degree am I wasting my time and my energy by caring about people who don't like me or hate my work or don't want my work to be published or to go out there? Punditry. You can spend a lot of time criticizing ideas, and it's really easy once you start getting on, the train of criticizing ideas to slip into criticizing people. And it wasn't the person I was thinking I was talking to about this. I was talking to Hannah, the music maker, who did a really great mashup of Brett and Heather. Hannah Music, I think her name is. If somebody reminds me in the comments, I'll try to link her channel. But she was talking about to what degree should she involve herself in dog piles or in criticizing other people, because it's kind of a net negative to be going around criticizing people. She was talking about punching up. To what degree is punching up a good thing? And I questioned whether punching up ever leads to anything other than people kind of pretending to be lower status than they are in order to bring other people of higher status down. So it's a net negative. That whole concept of don't punch up basically incentivizes the destruction of hierarchies of competence, of hierarchies of status, and it works in the favor of the low bees on the totem pole. But the net positive for that isn't necessarily good content. It's just like you can focus your ire in one direction. But I made a distinction between kind of saying, punching up doesn't really matter to me. A better rule of thumb is to criticize ideas and not people. And so if you're talking about bad ideas, criticize the ideas, not necessarily the person, unless the person, I guess, is kind of like a politician or something like that, who's a representative of a group. Then it's kind of different to criticize a public persona, more or less. But even then, the content making fun of an individual or some gaffe that they did, or the individual themselves, is not necessarily going to arrive at a net positive amount of content from everybody involved in the conversation than it would be if people are, criticizing ideas and then also proposing new ideas. So that's just what I was riffing on. I don't know what got me off on that. Stream of consciousness live stream. Ryan APS, which episodes did you delete? If I said them, then I would kind of be violating my kind of the promise to the people that I deleted. So Howard Schoonover, longtime viewer, supporter of the channel. Thank you, Howard, for being here for me for so long. You ask, have you ever talked with Janice Fiamingo? Can I plug her new channel here? It's called Studio B. She used to do Studio Brulee. Is Studio B a rebranding of Studio Brulee? But it's funny that you should ask that. I am interviewing Janice Fiamingo on the 16th of February. So I was talking about scheduling out. She's somebody I've scheduled, and I'm looking forward to hearing her side of things. So yeah, she's coming up onto the crowd. Melanated Thinka says, yeah, and this crowd needs more emotional intelligence, to be honest. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. I don't know what you mean by this crowd. Are you talking about the random people that show up in the comments, or another crowd that I'm talking about? The concept, it's interesting. So I'm going to do another episode next month that's going to be possibly going to be really intense. But I'm going to be speaking with Robin Atkins and James Cantor about the topic of pedophlia. And Robin came on my channel and we spoke about that from her point of view. And James has been on my channel and we spoke about it from his point of view. And they really disagree with each other in different areas on that topic, but I think they agree with each other in other topics. So this might possibly be a blood sports kind of thing, and I'm not used to that. I always have agreeable conversations, so it'll be interesting to host disagreement on that really contentious issue. But I was going to say about emotional intelligence and thinking about it from the perspective of somebody who's very scientifically or rigidly scientifically minded, also with one professor at the Evergreen State College, who's not Brett Weinstein, Mike Peros. I've spoken a lot to him about what I do and what Brett does, and truth and reality, and then the internet and fakeness and lies. And I'm still of the stance that truth absolutely does matter, but the art of persuasion will actually get you further toward truth. Or moving people toward truth is different than stating the truth. And there is rhetoric and there's strategies of moving people towards truth that does, I think, maybe violate people's idea of being not necessarily blunt, but being truthful and being honest. And balancing those things is not an easy thing. And when we bring up emotional intelligence, when we bring up being kind to other people, the question is, are we being kind to them when we're not telling the truth? Or in what ways can we speak the truth about somebody, or speak the truth about what somebody has said that still allows room for them to change their position or doesn't misrepresent them as liars? And that's a big question. People call out other people all the time, and especially on the internet. And if you're not ready for that kind of rodeo, then you probably shouldn't have your hat in the ring. My stance with deleting some of the episodes is that, yeah, even if the people were wrong about certain things, or even if they had characters, their character wasn't up to certain standards that I would hope more people were striving for, it's still important for me to show different people at different states of existence and give the audience access to different points of view, even if those points of view are wrong, or even if those characters aren't necessarily the best characters. I still think it's really important to have the conversations and to expose people as human beings, and kind of facilitating the opening up of people has caused me to use certain tactics of interviewing or tactics of communication that are really non-judgmental, that really suspend my own judgment, and hopefully in order to kind of respectfully allow them to unfold. And that is kind of an emotional intelligence issue. My role is not to judge because of the content that I want to do, and yet that content itself can be weaponized against people against people by other people's pursuit of truth. And while I respect the truth tellers, and I think that they're absolutely important, especially in this day and age, there still is something to say without blunting the truth of being able to move people towards truth. And that does take whatever this emotional intelligence thing is, which is just, I guess, personableness and a certain attenuation to a broad variety of neurodivergent people, and I think we're all neurodivergent. Everybody's neurons are diverging all the time. I know there's certain people who have more extreme divergencies from normal neurosity or whatever that would be, not divergent, like neuro-orthodox, like even the term itself, like what's the opposite of that term? Normal? You're not even supposed to say normal, but I want to get humans. I want to take the internet. I guess we're going back to what I hope to do with this channel is to provide human content. And human content is messy stuff, and it's not necessarily about the truth or the facts in and of themselves. It's not about rendering people. There's a difference between being wrong and being dishonest. And a lot of my tactics I've seen make it really difficult for people to be dishonest to me. So that's different. When somebody's being dishonest to me, that eventually comes to light. And there are people that I've interviewed who later on down the road, their character has been shown and their attitude or what they were promoting turned out to be not what they honestly believed. There was a lot of dishonesty, and that dishonesty eventually comes to light. And I'm thinking of one person right now who I want to have back on the channel, but that person is so terribly canceled right now that I don't think I'll be able to have him back on the channel. Oh, speaking of somebody who's really awesome is coming on the channel, I should plug this. King Crocoduck and James Lindsay this Sunday. It's not going to be live streamed, but we'll record it on Sunday. I'll try to get it out on Sunday night. Looking so forward to listening to you guys talk and hearing about that. Those on the illiberal right are human all too human. So I think it would be cool to talk with King Crocoduck and James Lindsay, who are very strong truth tellers and very rational, incredibly rational people, but still have a very strong sense of truth that's based in some sort of humanity, and hearing how they move people toward truth, and the open question of stating the truth and moving people towards truth, and what it is to be illiberal. Maybe that liberalism that King Crocoduck was mentioning and the liberalism that James Lindsay promotes has certain values that would contain whatever is called emotional intelligence, or whatever that is, the art of persuasion, stuff like that. Ty Sparks thinks my neurons are identical. Identical to what? To each other? Are they all the same neurons? Why? They're not identical. They're in different parts of my brain. And they have different connections to everyone else. I don't know. I'm not a neurosurgeon or a neuroscientist, so I don't know. So, speaking of this character, if you want to look at the screen, I'm not going to say this character's name out loud. Well, okay, Jamil B. Watch the Evergreen Stories, like one of the colorfulest characters. And I just... today, on my way home, my route, the end of my route, I was thinking about, we got to get a Jamil song. And there's different ways to write these songs that I'm doing for the musical. You either like come up with the idea, you come up with the lyrics first, and the lyrics lead the song, or you come up with a tune, and then you fill in the tune with lyrics. And it seems to me, doing both of those things, that the better songs are when the music comes first, and when I hear the song and hear the music and let the music lead, because of my training, like the millions, literally the millions of words that I've written, and the amount of poetry that I've written, I can fit words into any spot. I understand words, and I understand how to just wait and refigure things until they fit into the music. But if the words are dictating the music, it doesn't have feeling. And it's really important to center everything on feeling. So I was thinking, I came up with this, do 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 do. Do 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 do. I'm like, that's sad. That's sad and sexy. Jamil B. And so I was thinking of this. So this is all I have of this song, if I can remember it. I wrote it down, but it goes, I'm a-laying on my bed alone. Nothing to do here but caress my phone. No one pays me any mind. It feels like I don't exist half the time. What's a poor boy to do to get a bone? Oh, homework done. Do. And then I'm thinking for this, do you guys ever watch that Annie, the musical Annie? There's this Mrs. Hannigan. There's this musical. I'm gonna have to go and watch it, but what I remember from that is this woman putting on makeup in this room and singing this song. I'm like, I'm gonna watch that and have this character. I don't know what his name will be, but the Jamil character. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use his real name. But the character that's based on him, making himself up, always trying to get into homework, always thinking about the need he has for attention and how he doesn't have anything, he doesn't really exist, and making himself up, and then figuring out that he could use race to get what he wants. He could use race to become more real and to get the attention. If you can be this thing, then you don't have to worry about being a person anymore, because being a person, he doesn't know how to figure it out. He doesn't know how to be a person. And he has so much longing, and he figures out that if he can do something with race, then that would be his way towards being more real. That's kind of the idea. So we'll see how he ends up processing that. But then for that song, he'll write that email or that Facebook post that then will be parodied, and then that will lead to the huge eruption on campus. So that's just an idea. So yeah, I want to certain characters are I want to give them psychological depth, and I think that the music is able to give psychological depth. Where again, when we go back to creating content on YouTube or going through and doing the anti-woke thing, you can criticize it as an argument, which is most important thing to do. And I really appreciate both James and King Crocoduck for focusing on that. And Charles Pennicourt and a lot of the people that I've interviewed have focused on the argumenting side. And then there's the libs of TikTok thing where you kind of just watch their behavior and you criticize their behavior and you kind of gawk at their behavior. And that's kind of the social pressure aspect of it, which I think is kind of a dead end, but it's still a necessary part of criticizing the entire ideology, because the ideology, it has these ideas in it, but those ideas manifest as behavior. And so if it's a bad ideology, you have to look at the behavior, judge if it's good or bad, and then look at the ideas and judge if they're good or bad. And you have to do both of those things. But while I've done that in the Evergreen State College documentary, or the footage that was created in 2017 by the students, really showed that behavior in such gory detail that it really shows that this ideology has a specific morality to it that is not beneficial. It's antisocial injustice. And so I did all the work to show that and to try to tie all those ideas together, and then do a lot of supplementary work with philosophers and thinkers and writers and individuals who've gone through thinking that way and coming out of it to critique it on that level. But I think that music and art allows us to actually embody the characters, right? To embody the individuals who are swept up in the ideology. That's why we would dramatize it. And that's the power of dramatizing it, is to give these people actual more life than they're given by all of this footage and even all of the ideas that they've written, like really reanimate them in a way. And I think that a lot of the characters are actually tragic characters. We can look at these characters just specifically in any story, but in the Evergreen train wreck, it's really easy to say, okay, this person's a bad person, that person's a bad person, that person's an inept person. But you know, the project of the art, or turning it into art, is to give them a little bit more than was shown from them, and recreate them in that way. And I think music also gives them more empathy and pathos to really possess, even though they were being really pathetic or pathotic, psychotically pathotic in that. So, whatever. Yeah. Boy Scouts, represent. If I wring little necks, surely I'll get an acquittal. There was one thing. There's one thing I want to rap about, and again, this is total internet stuff to talk about what somebody said. There's this pretty smart guy And I haven't interacted with him, but I've consumed his content and I've seen him around. He's doing really well for himself. His name is Scott Barry Kaufman. Oh, he follows me too. So I don't mean to criticize him personally. I should actually have him on the channel. But he wrote something that got a lot of traction, that Jordan B. Peterson, the Canadian psychologist, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. I haven't had him on my channel. Maybe someday I will. You guys can meet him. But he's kind of a big deal, like on Twitter and other places. Anyway, so Jordan Peterson retweeted this thing. And I was just thinking about this tweet, so I'm going to read it. I'm not going to put it on the screen. I'll just read it. So Scott Barry Kaufman wrote on January 24th, so 3 days ago. 3 days ago. I just had such a touching moment where I asked a non-binary person what their pronouns are, and they told me it meant the world to them that I even cared. Even just slight consideration of another person's preferred way of being can go a long way, all anti-woke debates aside. So I'm going to chop off the anti-woke debates aside. But there's a lot of different ways to just think about this. Like, why is he publishing this? What is his motivation? Is this a virtue signal? I think that he's being sincere about his wanting to say that we can be humane to people. We can show consideration of another person's preferred way of being. And that is just, the gender debate is just endlessly fascinating to me, because especially with pronouns, it's so open to postmodern deconstruction, because it's all entirely a language game. It's all about the text and inscribing the text, and a way of being is actually a way of speaking, and actually speaking precedes being in a way. And how would he know that it's a non-binary person without asking them if they're a non-binary person or not? Like, what about this person was non-binary? What does non-binary actually mean in this situation? There's no pictures appended to this, but somehow Scott Barry Kaufman knew that this person was non-binary. I don't know what that actually means. I kind of know what it means, but I think it doesn't really actually mean anything. But how would you know that without language? How would you know what a non-binary person is without language? It only exists within language. And then asking them their pronouns. There was something that was signaled by this person that Scott Barry Kaufman said, okay, well, this person probably wants to be recognized as a languaged being and wants to have an exception made in my language about them. There's something that was told or signaled about this person, and Scott Barry Kaufman picked this up somehow. So I don't know how. Was it fashion? Was it the way that they moved through a room? Was it their accent, or the way that they inflected their voice made them non-binary? I don't know. I don't know if it's male or female. I don't know if those constructs even matter anymore if we're only dealing in language. And then to express on Twitter that that being recognized as somebody who should be catered to with my language meant the world to them. And it meant the world to this non-binary person, that Scott Barry Kaufman even cared about the language that enwrapped this person, the language that would be modified in their wake around them, to suit them when they're not actually around, or to suit them when they're being spoken about. It's not necessarily true that I only use third-person pronouns when the person isn't in the room. When I'm talking about my friend to my other friend, I say, "Oh yeah, me and them, we went to the car and the thing, and then he said this, and then she did that, blah 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 blah." But it's just really, really interesting that the construct around pronouns and the way that our language is mutating into this more and more real thing than reality, and the disembarking of our language from reality is filled with so much emotion. And the way that emotion mutates language is through consideration. Scott Barry Kaufman says that even just slight consideration of another person's preferred way of being, which is a big thing. How is a way of being encapsulated by language? To what degree is my being my way of being inflected or impacted by somebody speaking about me, and which goes back to what I'm saying about revealing intimate things on the internet and getting to a place of being really honest on the internet. It's a fraught endeavor, but all of that attention causes it to be more real. All of the attention that we give each other through language and then through these mediums of media, through creating an avatar, creating a profile, and then filling that profile with content, that is actually more real to us than a lot of other things in our lives. We're very social creatures. So it's not necessarily the case that language is less meaningful than reality, or that language and reality aren't in this kind of dualistic relation, or there's two different relationships that we're having with language. Like we have language about, let's say, a microphone. We have language about the microphone that describes the microphone, and all of that language is very, very specific about the microphone, and we can all agree that all these words mean all these different things in order for us to interface with this microphone. A human being is not a microphone, so language kind of gets more, there's more qualia in it, and there's more subjectivity to language when we're talking about a human being. So, describing or defining a human being with a pronoun that used to refer to sex, but now it refers to this other thing called gender, it's reasonable. There's a reasonableness to it. There is a path to being considerate of that, but that consideration, if that is leading you, and the emotionality of the person is leading you in order to warp or to accommodate their reality in your reality, what does that do with your language? Language is your tool to speak about reality, to speak about other people, to speak to other people. And once you start accommodating that based on consideration of feelings, to what end does that destabilize, or to what degree does that stabilize language? Now, one more thing about the microphone. There's this thing, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's this thing that plugs into the microphone. It's called an XLR cable. And the proper way, or how we used to speak about these cables, is that there's a male and a female connector. And one thing that happened at Evergreen is that they struck that from their communications, specifically within the electronic media, the ones who would set up the microphones for all the events. They took male and female out of that because that was gendered language. The language that was being applied to this physical object, so we could agree this thing goes into the other thing, the male goes into the female, and it wasn't based on sex. It wasn't based on the very sexual thing that's going on with that language. It was based on this gender thing, gendering the language. So the actual sexuality, which you could assume that conservative, really conservative or really illiberal right people would want to strike sexuality from the language. This other thing from the left, from the progressive side, it wants all sex all the time. Everything's sex. Everything's sex. Sex. There's no limit to sex except for the least important type of sex for the very far left progressive movement is procreative sex. Sex that's about procreating is the most normative, and so the least accepted form of sexuality. But everything else goes. But now we're going to see how sex has informed our language, and then start to mutate our language around this thing, which is really interesting. That this construct, this microphone, if you actually look at every single word that are used in the microphone, those words all eventually related to something that are not the microphone. If you go into etymology, you see this in all these things. Foam, you just look up all these words. They come from other things. Like all these little Latin terms. All the most technical terms have this human origin, this very basic, rudimentary, human life-size origin to it. And it's all developed from meaning that we had in previous environments. And as we manipulate our environment and change our environment, we take our knowledge, or we update our words for the environment. And it's just funny that sex showing up there is gendering this thing. And then you're enforcing all of these dynamics. What are you doing? When you say that there's a male and a female chord, are you evoking the patriarchy? Are you saying that something is lesser because it needs to be plugged into? It can only send a signal, right? And the male, I guess, receives a signal or whatever. I don't even know like what what directionality in any given male and female plug setup is going on with regards to the currents of information or water flow or whatever. I don't know if it necessarily always goes one way or the other, but then all of a sudden you're deconstructing that on this you're querying the microphone, you're querying your technology. So that is done, that accommodation is done, no longer calling the male and the female plugs or hookups, male and female, is done out of consideration for other people's feelings. They feel validated for that moment. The question is, are they done feeling validated? Do they need validation? What's the psychology of being validated with pronouns? To what is your mental state that a pronoun means that much to you? And I'm not saying that that's not necessarily important to a lot of people, and I've interviewed a lot of people where the pronouns do matter. But you have to ask, like, what is the emotional content, and what are all the other things that are going on that would cause that to be so important, and then cause other people changing their language to accommodate you? To what degree? What is really motivating that? And how do you tell when somebody's doing that honestly? And how do you tell when somebody's gaming the system to get more attention? And to what degree does that really actually one, corrode the precision of language, but actually do anything positive other than something that's politeness, something other than consideration? Now, when I bring up politeness, I think a lot about like etiquette, court etiquette, civility. There are periods of time and there are, places in life where court etiquette or etiquette becomes very, very important. And there are certain societies where etiquette becomes something that's very important to them. Other societies are very informal. And again, what you see in the West over the course of the last 50 years, we have become less and less formal with our language. Let's just say with cuss words. Cuss words used to be kept off of television, and there was little exceptions, and then cable came on, and then movies started using more and more cuss words. You have Goodfellas come on, like there's some insane amount of F words in Goodfellas, and you see that language becomes normalized. That which was off the table, I should probably try to get John McWhorter on, the language that was off the table is now on the table. And I do remember John McWhorter talking about like the changes in taboos in our language, and that cuss words used to be associated with bodily functions and sexuality and stuff like that. And now cuss words have to do with group identity and ascribing negativity to group identity. So you are always going to have some form of etiquette, and that etiquette is going to be informed by consideration of other people's feelings. And navigating that as a society is a constantly ongoing process. To what degree will you being considerate of this change in your language actually affect you? To what degree does it actually affect how you see reality, how you interact with reality? And is it always only a negative effect? If you think that regarding somebody as using different pronouns for somebody of the sex that you're not used to using pronouns with, to what degree is that accommodation, an imposition on your truth-telling? I think that everybody actually has to make up that decision on their own. I think everybody should be free to make that decision on their own, and I think that there should be some accommodation for people who don't want to change their language for that. I think that the accommodation and the consideration has to go both ways, or else it's not consideration. It's fiat. So if this person was considerate, so if the person who was so touched by being asked their pronouns then extended that grace to others who don't want to change their language to accommodate them, and that was a mutual exchange of like, you are in a different reality than I am. One, does that make a better society where we all can get along and you can use different words and I can use different words without like trying to rule over each other with our different languages? And to what degree does that start to fracture society because we start to see reality differently, right? And I think that there's going to be a cost to that. I think there's going to be a cost to that if everybody starts either enforcing a certain language that doesn't match up with people's reality, or we just split in different ways and say, I'm not a gendered person. I'm never going to put gendered pronouns in my bio. But every time I have an interaction with somebody with pronouns in their bio, it has been negative for me online, So whoever has pronouns in their bio, as soon as I see that, I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm not going to engage with this person. They're living in another reality and I can't change them. And it's not just about the pronouns in the bio. It's because those pronouns is them signing up to an entire way of thinking about the world that I disagree with. Now, I haven't completely fleshed out my thoughts on everything that's connected to and why I disagree with it, but I know from the behavior of seeing so many people with pronouns in their bio that they're signed up with something that manifests certain behavior that I find problematic, to say the least. So it's interesting. It becomes a tribal signal. So those who are considerate of this change in language, to what degree are they a part of another tribe? And to what degree are they switching tribes? To what degree can they stay in two places at once? To what degree can they relate to these two different worldviews that are becoming more and more distinct and more contentious? Right? Consideration, politeness will end up leading you towards the path of most emotionality, or least resistance to emotionality, the least resistance to somebody's emotional state. That's politeness. And that's necessary. So emotional intelligence, checking in, it's necessary, but you also have to be aware that there is a line saying, okay, well, I'll accommodate you so far, but no further. And I will speak to you in such a way that I will give you access to my ideas, but I'm not going to stop believing my ideas, stop speaking my ideas. I will give you access to my ideas. I don't know. So I just wanted to speak about that because it was just interesting phenomenon. And then there was a bunch of other stuff that happened around Scott's tweet because, or Mr. Kaufman's tweet, because Peterson retweeted it, and then there's all these other things that was going on. It's just really interesting. And I'm sure that most of my audience is probably not pronouns in their bio and probably anti-pronoun switching for a variety of different reasons, I would hope. Everybody has their own reasons, how they got to there and why they hold that view. But I know that most of us will be in a certain camp and not in another camp. With regard to that, to what degree that cuts me off from being able to even connect with people of that camp is an open question and kind of sad that you lose access to people. Good vibes from Liz Towell. No, I know. Terry Stevens Severson says that I worked with Toller, so I don't know what she's saying that I know, but about how language and reality, the relationship between language and reality is rather important and fascinating. I'm not a hard linguist. I'm not like a hard, language has to match up with reality all the time because there's a lot of play in language. So I'm never speaking I speak the truth when it's time to speak the truth, but I also play around with thoughts and with sentences and stuff like that. So I'm always mutating language. I'm violating the terms of agreement of being straightforward talker just because I'm an artist. So I take artistic license with that. To what degree that degrades my language, degrades my connection to other people is an open question. To what degree I'm degrading language by playing around with it is another question. To what degree I'm actually making it more robust and more resilient is another question. And you would have to go on a tweet-by-tweet basis, which someday I'm going to turn all my tweets into little fortune cookies. I was thinking of calling them Benjamin's Wise Kraken cookies. And you open them up and you have a little aphorism from Benjamin Boyce. I would have to get in contact with some sort of Chinese cookie maker and see if I can program that in there. But merch ideas are always there. Pair character bowling down saying, thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to think of what a pair character bowing down. I thought bowling. Like, this is a weird. I don't know if there's pear-shaped bowling emojis yet. Or, anyways. What are we talking about? Oh, wow. It's been 50 minutes. What happened out of my mouth for 50 minutes? What was I doing for 50 minutes? Has it really been 49 minutes? Do I want to talk about this thing? So I've been saving up money and, I had this nice little kitty in my corner. I had a nice little kitty in my corner. As people are supporting my channel, so thank you. I'm going to talk about something I don't really want to talk about because I feel like I shouldn't have nice things, but I got a nice thing. I got a really nice thing. So beautiful. Anyway, so Tune In Dropout says, it's easy to get derailed when dealing with language surrounding current conversations regarding gender. Matt Walsh on Dr. Phil did well. Yeah, that was a good little debate that Matt Walsh had with the non-binary crew. He simply asked them to define the words they were using, and they couldn't do it. Well, the question is, if they did it, well, why couldn't they do it? If they began to define it, what is it about those languages? What would be the game? Have they actually thought through the game and they say that if we cross this line, we're screwed? Or if we cross this line, we don't know what's going to happen. We can't control our narrative because we haven't studied far enough. We are believers. We are not apologists for this. We only ever attack with regard to this thing. We demand, we attack that this word means this thing. And no matter what anybody says, this word means this thing. And there's a lot of different, very rigid rhetoric that I spend a lot of time critiquing that's coming from a lot of different bowers of this gender debate. There's a lot of people who are involved in the gender debate that are hyper rhetorical. They're really easily triggered on a rhetorical level because you can predict after just reading how they write and reading how they respond and reading how they've been conditioned to respond to certain stimuli. You can see that they're always only going to ever respond in a certain way. Any given criticism will result in you blaming the victim. And then you just can see all these different little thought terminating cliches going on, basically these little aphorisms. And it's just, it can be frustrating, but you wonder if people have thought outside of that box. Have they studied this rhetoric so much that they can reproduce this rhetoric and then find enough people reproducing this rhetoric that they can process all this different information when something comes along that they can't process? That's the whole point of being tricky with language, giving something to people that they can't process or that causes them to process how they normally would process because they're conditioned to process and then spit back retorts to certain stimulus, but then hide within that stimulus something that's completely different and show you're actually not looking. You're not seeing straight. You're not seeing what I'm saying. You're not seeing what I'm saying because you're only seeing what you've been conditioned to see. And that is not good. It's not good for you to be that way. That is a low level of being. That is not a developed, intelligent way of being, not being flexible with different new phenomena, not looking for the trick. And with regard to me working with toddlers, me working with kids for a long time, I always try to trick them very obviously. It's the dad joke thing. Not necessarily a dad joke, but the trickster thing. You give them age-appropriate trickery so that they can spot the lie. They can spot the joke. They can spot the sarcasm. And you train them to teach that this language stuff, the literal stuff that's going on with language, doesn't necessarily line up with the intention behind the language. You need to be smarter than just a word machine. You actually have to process the words. And if you're always doing that, then it's really easy. If you lose that habit of processing information novelly, of saying, okay, is there something else going on in this word, this sentence, this statement, this political philosophy? Is there something else going on behind this trans women or whatever kind of dictatorial, activistic kind of rhetoric statements that come out there and sit there? Is there anything else going on inside of that? Is there anything else going on inside the people who are challenging that? If you're not used to always challenging yourself, always being challenged, but only ever, I guess, outwardly challenging, or always ever going to be on the warpath for any given thing because you want to win or whatever the game is for people who are pitted in political activistic rhetorics, which maybe they don't have time to think through things because they're always in some sort of battle zone. You become a tool of the ideology. You become that which is the mouthpiece of this meme. Just this meme is controlling you. You're basically a puppet. If you're not constantly checking your strings, right? And checking what's triggering you, that's the only way to not be a puppet. And to always be in that habit is the absolutely foremost thing to do, to teach a child to be intelligent like that and fostering their curiosity, but also fostering their sense of sarcasm and irony, I think really deeply, it provides them tools for dealing with a hyperlinguistic world. Tune in, drop out wrote, it's easy to get to real. Oh, I already read that. Oh, this one. Charles Rentz. Rency? Loading bread. Is that what your thing says? It took Matt Walsh one simple question to win his debate on Dr. Phil. One question, well chosen, is all it takes. And the question is, to what degree do those people think outside of the box and come up with actual, like, go down that world? Or they say that we can't think past this point. We can't think past this point because then everything inside of our zone will collapse, or because I never actually ventured outside of it. I never actually questioned that. I was told not to question that. I was told not to question that, so I've never questioned that. And now that you're questioning that, I can't do it or I won't do it. That's the open question. That's what I was trying to say in a very long roundabout way. Atlas spoke, shared his meme, nature values virtue. It has no choice. You do. I like that. You should make a wisecracking cracker yourself. Oh, this Atlas spoke's got a lot of them. Is this just a Randian popping off here? Randian, little sweet Randians into the comment field? Radical simplicity is the key to a happy life in fractious times. Good stuff. Anyways, so I saved up money, and I had this incident. I had this male, this male confession. I had this masculine incident happen to me where this guy yelled at me for driving, and then I got really obsessed with being in control of my car. I've never had a nice car, just pick up a car. Cars never really mattered to me, but for some reason, getting yelled at by this guy just made me obsessed with freaking vehicles. And I spent the last 6 months or so, 5 or 6 months now, just devouring automotive content on YouTube, learning all about all these different vehicles, learning all about all these different ways that vehicles work and all the different parts of the vehicles and stuff. And I found one. I found the vehicle. You know, I got into my price range, and I'm like, okay, well, what are my selections in this price range? And then I felt it out, and I got this thing. I got this vehicle. It's just, I'm having a hard time with this vehicle because I'm not a materialistic person. I mean, I say that, but I'm surrounded by a bunch of technology. I'm surrounded by all this material stuff, but I never I've never had an item, a vehicle specifically, that is just this beautiful, just a piece of art, like just machinery. I'm not talking like it's called a GR86. It's a rear wheel drive sports coupe, 2 seats. You kind of have 2 in the back, standard shifter. It's got this little boxer engine. It sits really low to the ground. It's very small. It's very compact. It sits really low to the ground, and it's faster than anything I've ever driven. But people say, like, I've looked a lot into this. People say it's not really a fast car, but it wants to accelerate. Like I'm in this break-in period where I'm just driving around, getting used to it and letting it all sync up, because you have to like let all the different parts of the vehicle like get used to one another and get together, you know, for 1,000 miles or whatever. So I'm not really gunning it or caning it. I had to look up that word and I couldn't find it, but caning a vehicle is driving it to the limit. So it's only at half limit. But it's this magic thing. It's this magic thing. The sound of it and the way that it's all put together, it just, every time I get to a corner, it just says, hit me hard. And you just slam into these corners and the handling is so tight. It's like this syringe. It's everything I wanted. So I talked to Carol Hooven, brilliant woman. That interview didn't get at least half as many views that it got. Just a brilliant woman. Love that woman. But I was talking to her about it, and she asked me, well, why, what is it about that reaction that you had to that man yelling about her with you that made you obsess with a vehicle? And I was thinking about competence. I was thinking about, ultimately, this guy was yelling at me because he didn't think that I was competent. I want to be really competent with what I do. My day job is driving. So I've been really paying attention to the road for the last 5 years now, 4.5 years since I left Evergreen. I've been working this. So I want to be in control. And this vehicle, while it has status around it, which is weird, again, this is the stuff that I don't really like about these objects. They have all this status, and you're playing all this social games with that stuff, which is fun, but it's still like, I don't trust that. It's just this thing. But the amount of control that I have of this vehicle is extreme. I have extreme amount of control with this vehicle, which means that the vehicle will do exactly what I say, which means that I have to be very attentive to everything that I'm doing with this vehicle. And it rewards me by doing it like that. It's just, I've never been in this world. It's something completely different. I'm out of my element. I shouldn't say, I don't know. I feel bad, but at the same time, it's so novel. It's just a novel thing that's going on. So I'm going to do some content with the vehicle. The other thing with car culture is that I get involved in these forums because I want to learn how the thing operates. I want to learn how to treat it. I want to really master shifting on the number of different levels. Like I'll start racing. There's actually a racetrack about 15 miles away. So this summer I'll try to really master the vehicle. I just want to master this thing. There's something about this piece of engineering that I'm just so happy to be engaged with and have this relationship with. And I was thinking about it today because I found a parking lot and I did some donuts, and the thing just went completely out of control, but completely in my control. So I told it to go out of control, and I controlled it while it was out of control. And I was thinking about that in relationship to the content creation thing. And you see these different content creators, these different personalities, right? They're human beings, but then they start creating content, and the content creation, they create like this vehicle that is driving them through this internet world, and it gets them places. Literally, it gets them up and down status hierarchies, right? And then there's certain relationships that form between that persona, which is it's like a car. It's basically the internet is a series of tubes, and these virtual personas that are created and driven by people are the cars. And some people, their cars drive them, and other people drive their cars, and certain cars start to get more momentum to them and start to get more power in a different respect. And they start to get more momentum basically. And that can careen off course. And you need to be if you have the right vehicle, if you have the right persona, you can get out of control in such a way that you can control the chaos. Right. And I was just thinking about controlling this vehicle that I spun out. I was able to get it to drive. I could almost drive the thing sideways. It's so insane. This thing can, if you do it right, you can actually drive this thing sideways, which is such an awesome feeling, like of just power and control. But it's so much chaos in that thing. And I was just thinking about how driving the correct way in the internet, driving wild, they call it spirited driving, right? Being a spirited personality is to kind of play with the chaos, but never let it out of your control. But at the same time, kind of embrace that it's a little bit out of your control. Kind of being edgy or kind of putting things on the line, doing risky content in different ways. Being vulnerable is one way you can do it, which isn't necessarily, I'm going to go out and attack somebody's ideology, but I'm just going to say, I'm an imperfect being, or being vulnerable, like actually putting yourself out there. There's risks involved in that. And I don't think a lot of people, I think the problem with the internet isn't that it's driving us crazy or we're being psychotic about it, but we just don't really understand that we aren't our personas. We are not our profiles. We are driving our profiles, or our profiles are driving us, but those are two different things. You as a person are not your profile. And again, when we get back to the gender stuff, that stuff matters because that person, it could be the case that some people who are very obsessed with pronouns are being driven by what perceives them. That which is their profile, that which is perceived about them is what is driving them, rather than them just taking what is and driving it to get what they want, get something more than what they want out of it. Yeah. So people, I think because it's so immediate, because it's created out of everything that really matters to us, meaning faces and sounds and our words, our thoughts, our opinions. We upload so much of ourselves into this thing, and we think that we're actually uploading ourselves, and it's built to make you think that way, especially with, I guess, more so Facebook was trying to be honest, but then, with Instagram, it's like, I am this thing. It's a little bit more removed from you, a little bit more produced in Instagram. But people who aren't fully developed mentally or people who are not aware of what's going on, they start to identify with their persona, and then their persona basically traps them. They're being driven by their car, their vehicle, by identifying with it, not as a tool anymore, or not as a way of getting something or moving in the world, but rather as themselves. And then they're basically owned by it. And I'm going to have John Vervaeke on this next month. Next month's going to be freaking lit, guys. I'm going to talk to John Vervaeke about this. I think John Vervaeke is one of the most important speakers one of the most important thinkers on the internet right now. He's not accessible to everybody, but I think he's profoundly important. What he's doing, the research he's doing, I mean, I don't think I probably would agree with everything or most of what he believes, but just his thinking and the ideas that he's engaging with are very important, and they do have to do with what I'm talking about us creating gods out of ourselves, basically. These immaterial spiritual creatures, right? That go and speak to people in their room at night, right? And if you think you're on your social media, you're like, well, these are just a bunch of voices in my head. Twitter is just a bunch of voices in your head. That's all it is. You are actually reading those voices in your head. It's not audio. I mean, there's those rooms and stuff, but it's just a bunch of voices in your heads. It's just a bunch of spirits, right? And you turning yourself into a spirit and then talking to somebody while they're in their underwear across the world, they're just waking up and they're reading your tweet about like some little wordplay that you made about this rock that you tripped on or whatever. You begin to be seduced by the power of this medium. And it's really important to be aware of that. And so I guess maybe to justify the fact that I have this very powerful instrument now, this instrument, this car, the thing is just beautiful to look at. It's very seductive. It'd be very easy to just become possessed by this thing and let it drive me around. And the question is, to what degree can I enjoy this thing without like surrendering myself to it, right? I'll do some content. I've found some roads. I live in some areas with some amazing roads. So, and by amazing roads, I mean like a lot of twisty turny stuff. So I'll do some content on that. Maybe put it on this channel, or maybe put it on another channel, or maybe do content while it is in there. If for nothing else, just to kind of make the point that this thing it's a work of art, but it's also a tool. And the relationship that I have with this thing that's very real, and that now it kind of owes me because I owe money on it. So there is this relationship where I owe it. I have to work really hard to make it completely mine. And I'm willing to do that because of what it's giving me. So there's a back and forth there. But just having a major thing in my life is new to me, but it's also making me think in a different way about this virtual world, which is probably just as real as roads for a lot of people. A lot of people don't drive. A lot of the young people are driving less and texting more, right? Like that's the trend. So what we're dealing with is a generation who is separated from these physical objects. And probably necessarily, there might be truth. I don't know, because I haven't read a billion studies about this, but it might be true that it's time to kind of let go of the combustion. The internal combustion engine has had its day. And if that's the case, then I have 100 years of work in my backyard at the topmost form. I mean, there's better cars out there for sure. I mean, this isn't completely the best, but like the amount of work and thought and innovation put into this material object is a little bit closer to a different form of engagement with the world. And I was also thinking about that today because I watched a lot of videos on this particular car and a lot of cars, and you see how it handles, but you don't feel it. And being in the car is a completely different sensation than watching the videos. There's things that don't translate to video, and being reminded of that, being situated in my body, being situated in a physical thing, I guess I could just picked up racquetball at this point. But there might be something that's meaningful beyond it just being this awesome thing. And it's just this awesome thing. It's just this awesome thing. That's all. It's just awesome. Anyways, enough about my beautiful car. Who we are on the internet is our ego distilled to its purest form. I don't know. There's that id thing and that superego too going on. There's a lot of different aspects to the human self, but I think it's I just to kind of push back on you, Charles. You say that who we are on the internet is our ego distilled in its purest form, and I don't know if you're just talking about the ego or the self, and if it's possible to make a distinction from that. Is it really the purest form if you're merely reacting to things? Is it really your pure ego if you're just caught up in certain circuitries of argumentation or belief and certainty and snark and trolling, these behaviors? Do these behaviors are they necessarily your ego distilled? There might be sound bites of it. There might be kind of little nuggets of it, but I don't know if it's like the purest ego until you start to actually understand what you're doing, until you actually start to be very conscious. I think that the purest form of one's ego would be an ego that's conscious, more than just distilled into these different streams, these different media and stuff. So it's not that you can't have a distilled ego in these things, but I think that, and it's not that you can't be conscious while you're interacting with this. It's actually incumbent upon everybody to be more conscious with their choices and what they're doing on the internet, what they're doing with other people. I mean, it all matters. It's all very meaningful. There's different layers or degrees of reality to it, but it still is very important if you are specifically, it's important in one way more than any other way. Even if it's virtual, it's important that either you're conscious or you're not conscious. And developing consciousness gives you the gift of being able to be free with your will and say, I have a drive, I have a desire, I have an urge, I have an ambition. I'm conscious of that, and I can start to decide if I'm going in the right direction or start to make choices, start to solve problems in ways that you hadn't before because you're just more conscious with that. So, you know, it's a spiritual exercise in a way. And by spiritual, I don't mean just like a belief system or some sort of religious thing, but this is about becoming a human being. The internet is about becoming a human being, and the test of that. Are you that which is driven, let's just say, by your lust? And so you use the internet to consume sexual content, you know, like that you're the vehicle of the lust. What happens when you watch pornography? Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, this is just what it is you are making an exchange of sexuality, of your sexual urge, your will, with light and sound, with something from a server, something that's a depiction of somebody else somewhere else. There's a transaction going on. So to what degree is that necessary? Is that good? That's bad? I'm not saying anything like that. But if you're not conscious that that is what you're doing, then you can't decide for yourself if that's what you want to be doing or if that's the proper use of this tool. Is this tool driving you or are you driving it? It's an open question. No judgment from me. I'm driven all the time by all these different things. Not least of all, the desire to talk, which I didn't have any. I hate doing these live streams and then an hour goes by and somehow it happened. Kick says, I have no ego. I am a bot. I'll drink to that. Rebecca says, what? No, the internet is about becoming disembodied. I mean, Mary Harrington brought up like a brain and a data in a server cloud is not a mind. Am I a mind? If I put enough of my data in to the server and you react to the data that I put in there as though it is a mind, if the footprint of my mind interacts with your mind, and then your mind decides to get back out of the internet and go do something, you know, make a different choice or, you know, get on a car forum and check out this GR86, see what I'm talking about. You know, it's a medium for maybe disembodied, but it goes back into the body. And to what degree is that mind really only in my neurons? To what degree is my personality only in here, only in my meat space? Is there not some sort of reality of being reconstituted or some sort of intersubjective Benjamin that supersedes me or is beyond me because it is interacting with all these people who aren't me and they're participating in the creation of Benjamin. They're co-creators of this by responding to it, by causing me to think twice or correct the way that I speak. And then that Benjamin that people see starts to shift and change. And yeah, it is disembodied, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot of power to it, a lot of force to it. Not to say, I don't mean to be argumentative if you weren't calling me out with that one, Rebecca. I'm just thinking about that with regard to Mary saying that a mind in a server is not a mind. I'm like, well, do we know that yet? And I'm thinking of like all the thousands of science fiction novels that say, well, if you do this and if you do that, there's a lot of questions. It's not an open door. It's not an open shut thing. I mean, strictly, it's true that a mind without a brain and a brain without a body, they all flow. They're all packaged together. But technology is an extension of our minds, right? All this technology is an extension of our minds. This is us manipulating our environment. The camera is not a mind, but it was made by a mind. It's the shape. It's shaped by a mind. It's the imprint of a mind, and I'm putting my mind into it and using that to interact with other minds. So there's just a lot of gray area in this thing. There's a lot of gray area. Again, why free speech with consciousness or awareness is important. And maybe emotional intelligence could be supplanted with just consciousness, but just basic more consciousness and more awareness of humans as humans, of topics as topics. Free speech important. Free speech with intelligent people. It's really important. And intelligent people always involved in the process of becoming more intelligent or practicing intelligence, let's say, and practicing awareness is what it's all about. So it's just a tool. Just a bunch of tools, guys, including me. Somebody's addicted to spuds. I have to think about dinner. That's what I'm thinking about now. So I should go have dinner. I'll let you guys go on with your merry way. Thank you so much for showing up and being part of my channel. Love you guys. Sorry I haven't been checking in. Working really hard offline on this musical. I'm working really close with the musician in Chicago. I don't know. She's probably working on the musical. She's usually in chat. So hopefully we're going to try to get something out by the Evergreen's 5th anniversary of the Evergreen Spring, which is May 23rd. But there's so many different steps. This is something that's much bigger than I've ever done before and involves a lot more people than it has ever involved. So mapping out the musical itself and then getting it performed by musicians. There's a lot of different levels to it, and I think it should be done good. So trying to figure out how to give people content so that they see that it's there, and also preserving it to develop on its own is kind of a tightrope thing to walk. So I do think that, and I don't ever say this, and I don't really do this, I'm really just an open book. I do have Patreon. I do have different ways that you can support me, and I totally appreciate the support. But but I don't like paywalling content. I like to just give the content, and if people like the content, they can pay for the content. I could do better with giving special content. You're supposed to do that as a content creator, but everything I create that I want to show, I don't like having paywalled. I just want it out there. Other than my writing, I kind of make it hard to people get into, but who cares about that? So I think that over time, I'll be able to put the music out there first in the subscriber zones, and then from there, people can see it, because it just can't have attention. And music, it has to have a certain quality to it, or it doesn't work. And I don't have the skills to do that, so I need to actually concentrate a lot to enlist people and build up a structure to give birth to this thing. But it's happening, and in the meantime, I'll try to get as many interesting people and people who are willing to be wrong and people who are willing to be vulnerable and people who are willing to take criticism. All my stuff about, I don't mean to diminish people criticizing other people. And criticism's actually important. Checking people when they say something wrong, being honest, that's important. And people's feelings shouldn't get in the way of truth. But at the same time, there's a way of allowing people, especially broken people, to be seen. Gives access to other broken people and gives help to other people. Like the question about truth telling and calling other people out, are you really helping? Are you by by taking a voice out of the conversation, how many people was that voice about to persuade that is no longer going to be persuaded and see things a little bit differently? How down the road, what is it to not have, let's say, an autogynephile who's got some really messed up problems, being very vulnerable about those problems, and just having that out there for people to see, and maybe young men who are headed in that direction see this man in a broken state and see a lot of themselves in him and say, okay, I have to get this under control. And instead of allowing that to happen naturally, you said you had to go hard against that man because he's violating all these moralities that you have. To what degree are you damaging people by taking other people out of the conversation? That's just a question I have to ask. And is the pursuit of truth more important, or is the pursuit of winning or the pursuit of truth more important than the pursuit of helping other people? That's a value. Helping other people is a value. And yes, I'm not meaning to say that truth isn't important, but at the same time, allowing somebody to be wrong and just allowing that to happen, just giving that human space for somebody to show themselves in a space that isn't good. And just respecting that while also working on all this other stuff. To what degree did that help you to achieve deleting or chasing that man off? And to what degree have you actually ruined a lot of, or dissuaded a lot of other men potentially in the future from coming to terms with their own darkness, right? So, I mean, humans are dark people. Humans are dark people, and we have to just allow that to be shown. Because if we're not allowed to see the darkness because people want to destroy it, I mean, I don't know. It's just cross purposes. Sometimes. Be excellent to one another. I'm going to take off. I think that there was one more super chat that just popped up. Oh, there was two. Let me read them. Oh, nope. Maybe I missed one. Sorry if I did. Side note, what are the chances of bringing Alexander Bard on the pod about postmodernism and moralism? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go cook dinner and look for this Alexander Bard, see if he speaks, see if he speaks so I can see how he speaks, and then see if I'm somebody that he'd be willing to receive a invitation from. I may be big in somewhere, but I'm not big everywhere. So it's hard to convince certain people to respond to me. Anyways, you guys are great. You guys be very, very good. Go forward. I have a lot of content coming up on Sunday. Maybe on Monday, I'll have King Crocoduck and James Lindsay, Conceptual James, on. It's going to be a great conversation. I also have a lot of other things going on. And thank you guys for being part of this channel. Thank you guys for allowing me to do these interviews. It's a godsend. I'll catch you on the flip side. I don't know if anybody else on YouTube says that, and I just infringed on their kind of thing to say to depart. But if I did, I apologize. Anyhow, good night.